In a small town surrounded by fields and quiet roads, there lived a girl named Amara. She was 16 years old, and she loved music more than anything else in the world. But her family was poor. Her father worked long hours at a lumber yard, and her mother took in sewing jobs to help pay the bills. There was no extra money for lessons, and there was certainly no money for a piano. Amara had wanted to play the piano since she was 7 years old. She remembered the exact moment the desire was born. She had been walking past the old community hall when she heard someone practicing inside. The sound drifted out through an open window, soft and rich, like warm light spilling onto the street. She stood outside for almost an hour, unable to move, until the music finally stopped. From that day on, she carried the sound with her everywhere she went. But dreams do not pay for pianos. Amara knew this. She had asked her parents once, when she was 10, if she could take lessons. Her mother had looked at her with tired eyes and said gently, "I wish we could, sweetheart. I really do." Amara never asked again. She did not want to make her mother feel worse than she already did. Instead, Amara found other ways to be near music. She volunteered to clean the community hall on weekends, just so she could sit at the old piano there for a few minutes after her chores were done. She watched videos on the library computer, studying the way pianists moved their hands. She drew piano keys on a strip of cardboard and practiced silent scales in her bedroom at night, imagining the sounds in her head. One evening, when Amara was 14, she found her grandfather's old tools in the shed behind her house. He had been a carpenter, and though he had passed away years earlier, his tools remained untouched, wrapped carefully by her father, who could never bring himself to sell them. Amara ran her fingers over the smooth wooden handles. An idea began to form in her mind, one so bold that she almost laughed out loud. She would build her own piano. She knew it sounded impossible. She had no formal training in woodworking, and pianos were complicated machines with hundreds of moving parts. But Amara was stubborn, and she had 2 years of watching internet videos and reading library books about instrument making. She decided that if she could not have a real piano, she would build something close enough, something that made sound, something that was hers. It took her nearly 2 years. She worked in secret at first, embarrassed that anyone might laugh at her. She salvaged wood scraps from the lumber yard where her father worked, asking the foreman for pieces that would otherwise be thrown away. She found old piano wire at a scrapyard 2 towns over, carried home in a backpack that dug painfully into her shoulders during the long walk. She taught herself, through trial and error, how to carve keys that would rise and fall properly, how to stretch and tune wire so it created something close to the right notes, how to shape a soundboard so the tone would not sound flat and dead. There were nights when she wanted to give up. Twice, her early attempts collapsed entirely, the wood splitting under the tension of the wires. She cried both times, sitting alone in the shed, surrounded by broken pieces of her dream. But each morning, she returned to the shed anyway. Something inside her refused to let the dream die quietly. Finally, just after her 16th birthday, Amara finished her piano. It was not beautiful in the way a factory-made piano is beautiful. The wood was a mismatched patchwork of different shades, held together with careful joints and old nails hammered flat. Some keys were slightly uneven, and the whole instrument leaned very slightly to one side. But when Amara pressed the first key and heard a real, true note ring out into the quiet shed, she began to cry again. This time, they were tears of joy. She played it every day after that. She taught herself simple songs by ear, then more complicated ones. Her fingers grew stronger and more certain. Her mother would sometimes stand in the doorway of the shed, listening, tears in her own eyes, proud of a daughter who had built something out of nothing. Word of the handmade piano slowly spread through the small town. Some people were kind about it, calling Amara clever and determined. But others were less kind. A boy at her school mocked her once in the hallway, calling her piano a pile of firewood that made noise. Amara pretended not to care, but the words stung. She stopped mentioning the piano at school after that, keeping her music as something private and sacred, something not everyone deserved to know about. Then, everything changed because of a video. Amara's younger cousin, Ines, had visited one afternoon and filmed Amara playing a soft, original melody on the handmade piano. Without telling Amara, Ines uploaded the video online, along with a short caption explaining how the piano had been built from scrap wood and old wire by a teenage girl with no formal training. The video showed Amara's hands moving across the uneven keys, her eyes closed, completely lost in the music. The video did not become famous overnight. For the first few days, it received only a small number of views, mostly from people Ines knew personally. Amara did not even know it existed until her cousin finally admitted what she had done, worried that Amara might be upset. Amara was not upset. She was embarrassed, at first, imagining strangers watching her play something so imperfect, but there was nothing to be done about it now, so she let it be. Slowly, over the following 2 weeks, something began to shift. A few larger accounts shared the video, always with the same kind of caption: "A girl who could not afford a piano, built her own out of scrap wood, and she can really play." Comments filled with encouragement began appearing beneath the video. People from cities Amara had never visited wrote messages telling her how much her story moved them. Some said they had cried watching it. Others said it reminded them why they had wanted to be musicians in the first place, before life had gotten in the way. Then, one morning, everything changed again. A famous concert pianist named Julian Wren, known around the world for his incredible skill and his generous support of young musicians, came across the video while scrolling through his phone during a quiet morning at home. He watched it once, then watched it again. Something about the girl's face, so full of quiet joy despite the roughness of her instrument, stayed with him for the rest of the day. Julian Wren had grown up with very little himself, though few people remembered that part of his story anymore. He had learned to play on a piano missing 3 keys, in a room with no heating in the winter. When he saw Amara's video, something old and familiar stirred inside him, a memory of hunger, not for food, but for music, for a chance to be heard. He reached out through his team to find out more about the girl in the video. Within days, an arrangement was made for Amara and her family to travel to a concert hall in a nearby city, where Julian Wren was performing that week. Amara could hardly believe it when her mother told her the news. She thought, for a moment, that it might be some kind of mistake or a strange prank. It was not a mistake. On the night of the concert, Amara sat nervously in the front row with her parents, dressed in the nicest clothes they owned. She watched Julian Wren perform piece after piece, each one more beautiful than the last, his hands moving across the keys with an ease that seemed almost magical. Amara had watched videos of him online for years, never once imagining she would sit close enough to see the sweat on his brow as he played. Near the end of the performance, Julian Wren paused and addressed the audience. He spoke about the video he had seen, about the girl who had built her own piano out of scrap wood, because no one had given her one. He explained that music was never meant to belong only to those who could afford it, and that talent did not check a person's bank account before deciding where to grow. Then he asked Amara to come up onto the stage. Amara's legs felt weak as she walked toward him, the bright lights making it hard to see the audience clearly. Julian Wren smiled warmly at her and gestured toward the grand piano beside him. He told her, simply, "Play something for us." Amara sat down at the piano, her hands trembling. It was nothing like her handmade instrument at home. The keys were smooth and perfectly balanced, and the sound that came from even the lightest touch was rich and full in a way she had never experienced. For a moment, she felt frozen, unsure if she could remember how to play at all. Then she closed her eyes, the way she always did in the shed at home, and let her fingers move. She played the same original melody Ines had filmed weeks earlier, the one born from countless nights of practice on uneven, mismatched keys. The notes filled the concert hall, clear and full, carrying every bit of longing and hope that had gone into building her piano in the first place. The audience grew completely silent, listening. When she finished, there was a pause, just for a heartbeat, before the entire hall rose in applause. Amara opened her eyes to find people standing, some wiping away tears, clapping loudly. Julian Wren placed a gentle hand on her shoulder and told the audience that talent like hers deserved every opportunity in the world. In the weeks that followed, everything in Amara's life began to shift. Julian Wren personally arranged for her to receive proper piano lessons from a respected teacher in the city, and he helped set up a fund that would cover her training for as long as she wanted to continue. A local music shop, moved by her story, donated a real piano to her family, which was placed carefully in their living room, right where the old sofa used to sit. Amara did not forget her handmade piano, though. She kept it in the shed, cleaned and polished, a reminder of where she had started and how far determination could carry a person, even without money or fancy tools. Sometimes, when she needed to remember why she loved music in the first place, she would sit down at the old, uneven keys and play something soft, letting the familiar, imperfect sound wrap around her like an old friend. Years later, Amara became a respected pianist herself, performing in concert halls across the country. She never allowed her success to erase where she came from. Whenever she was interviewed about her journey, she always told the same story, about the shed behind her house, about the scrap wood and old wire, about the video her cousin uploaded without asking, and about the day a stranger's kindness changed the direction of her entire life. She often ended her interviews with the same simple words, spoken with quiet certainty. Talent does not wait for perfect circumstances. Sometimes, it simply builds its own instrument out of whatever is available, and waits patiently for the right person to listen. And somewhere in a small town, in a shed behind a modest house, an old, uneven, handmade piano still sat quietly, waiting for the next dreamer, who might need its reminder that determination can turn scrap wood into something the whole world eventually hears.